one way we can use this TrackMan facility to help us out, some pool noodles, always a fun thing to help us out. One thing that I've been working on in my swing, I should say I need to really start working on it, is my head hangs very, very back in my downswing. So you're going to watch my head go beyond that blue line quite considerably, quite noticeably. Something that I've been working on. I would much rather it go back than go forward for sure, but that's you're not going to see many world-class players doing what I'm doing in that swing, that's for sure. One of the guys that I like to model myself after is Zach Johnson. Very simple, repeatable golf swing. What's nice, I can actually flip around to be a left-hander just like me for visual comparison. Now, if we get up to the top, Zach and I are relatively similar. I mean, obviously he's a PJ player and I'm not. But we can see I'm, pretty consistent. I like my hips are kind of leading towards the target, my back's pointing towards the target, all that fun stuff. But watch Zach's head. It doesn't really go beyond that blue line. A lot more centered than it goes through. Mine, obviously, hanging back quite considerably. So, what I'm doing now is introducing a pool noodle to restrict it. And you'll actually see, so like the first one I did with the pool noodle was right here. And you'll just see how hard my head bangs into that pool noodle. Now, it definitely restricted me a little bit, but that head just bangs into that pool noodle. So the more I take swings with that pool noodle there, the more I feel a little restricted with my head motion. My goal with this is to actually increase a little bit of my hip motion. What drives me absolutely nuts in my golf game is that my hips thrust forward in the downswing, or my rear end comes off of that blue line in the downswing quite considerably, quite noticeably, and ew, do I dislike that. Don't like that look whatsoever. For me, get my rear that far off that blue line's no good, and you can see how it quite limits my hip turn. You don't see a whole lot of my lead leg here in the view. But what's good though is if I introduce the pool noodle here and start to restrict some of my body's motions, or I'm sorry, I should say my body's habits, right? As that head is restricted, that pool noodle's helping me. I'm still hitting it for sure, don't get me wrong, but if I go to the down the line perspective here, we can actually see more of my right butt cheek here. We can actually see more of my leg. And what I like to see for myself anyway, it's still not very great, but it's definitely better if I put a blue line on my rear, get myself up to the top, and then look at my rear through impact there. I can see that my hips or my rear has a much better chance of staying closer in line with that blue line. So it's all relative, it's all a combination of things for sure, but in an effort of keeping, there's my butt again, in an effort to keep my head a little bit more in frame, or kind of in between those two lines instead of drifting back, well, then my hips are going to have to make up the work and actually get myself more turned through to the target, which I'm very, very happy about. Boom. Allows me to complete my swing a lot more naturally, a lot more consistently and technically sound than I was doing before. You can see how I was hanging back quite a bit previously. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but that's something that I'm definitely going to have to get rid of. It causes me saggy knees, and it limits my hip turn, and quite frankly, I'm not getting any younger, and this motion on my back and spine and hips and thighs is, before too long, is not going to be very repeatable for me, so I should probably nip that in the bud now while I can.